My HOA president looked me dead in the eye and said, "Rules are rules," as he slapped me with a $500 fine for a fence stain that was barely off color. Meanwhile, his own yard was a disaster zone of code violations. Little did Todd know, I was about to become his worst nightmare. What happened next didn't just destroy his reputation, it landed him in handcuffs. If you've ever dreamed of taking down a power-hungry bully who thinks they're untouchable, smash that subscribe button right now. Hit the like button if you're ready for some ice-cold justice. And stick around because this story gets absolutely wild. Trust me, you don't want to miss how this unfolds. Picture this. You've just moved into what you thought would be your dream suburban neighborhood. White picket fences, manicured lawns, the whole American dream package. Instead, I walked straight into a petty dictatorship run by a man who would make Stalin proud. Meet Todd, our HOA president and the absolute worst kind of human being you can imagine in a position of power. Todd wasn't just your average control freak. This guy had turned our peaceful neighborhood into his personal kingdom of fear. He would prowl the streets like a hawk, hunting for violations with the enthusiasm of a kid on Christmas morning. Trash can out at 9:01 a.m. instead of 9 o'clock. That'll be $200. Thank you very much. Grass half an inch too tall, another fine mailbox slightly faded. You better believe that's going to cost you. But here's what made my blood boil. Todd was the biggest hypocrite I'd ever encountered. While he was terrorizing families with his ridiculous fines, his own property looked like a disaster zone. His fence towered above the city height limits, casting shadows across his neighbor's garden. Unpermitted structures dotted his backyard, like some kind of suburban shantytown. His grass won't even get me started on his grass. It looked like it had unseen a mower since the Clinton administration. The kicker. Todd had this smug little smile he'd flash whenever he handed out fines, like he was doing us all some kind of favor. He'd lean back in his chair during HOA meetings, fingers interlocked behind his head, talking about how difficult it was to maintain community standards while everyone else footed the bill for his power trip. My introduction to Todd's reign of terror came 6 months after I moved in. I'd installed a beautiful new fence around my backyard. Nothing fancy, just a standard 6-foot privacy fence in the approved style. But here's where things got interesting. The exact stain color specified in our HOA guidelines was back-adored at every store in the tri-state area. We're talking about a shade difference, so subtle you'd need a microscope to spot it. I did everything right. I got documentation from 3 different suppliers confirming the shortage. I took photos showing the minimal color variation. I even had a color specialist write a letter explaining that the difference was imperceptible to the naked eye. I submitted all this paperwork to Todd with a polite request for temporary approval until the correct stain became available. His response? A $500 fine slapped on my doorstep with a note that said, "Rules are rules, no exceptions." $500. For a stain that was maybe 2 shades off from the approved color. When I knocked on his door to discuss it like reasonable adults, Todd opened it with that infuriating smirk plastered across his face. I explained the situation calmly, showed him the receipts, the letters, the photos. I even offered to restain the entire fence the moment the approved color became available. You know what this man said to me? He looked me up and down like I was something he'd scrape off his shoe and said, "Rules are rules, buddy. Maybe next time you'll plan better." Then he shut the door in my face. Standing there on his porch, staring at that closed door, I felt something shift inside me. The frustration crystallized into something colder, more focused. Todd had just made the biggest mistake of his miserable little life. He thought he was dealing with another pushover neighbor, who'd just pay the fine and slink away. Instead, he'd just declared war on someone who was about to make dismantling his little kingdom a personal mission. They say keep your friends close and your enemies closer. Todd was about to learn that lesson the hard way. Instead of fighting him head-on like every other frustrated neighbor before me, I decided to play the long game. I was going to infiltrate his operation, learn his weaknesses, and then destroy him from the inside. The very next week, I showed up at the HOA board meeting with a bright smile and an eager attitude. "I'd love to get more involved in the community," I announced, practically radiating fake enthusiasm. "How can I help make our neighborhood even better?" Todd's eyes lit up like Christmas morning. Here was fresh meat. Another sucker to do his bidding and rubber stamp his decisions. He welcomed me aboard faster than you could say useful idiot. For 2 years, I played the part perfectly. The eager newbie who hung on Todd's every word. The helpful volunteer who took detailed meeting notes. The community-minded citizen who just wanted what was best for everyone. And all the while, I was watching, learning, documenting every dirty trick in Todd's playbook. I discovered Todd's system was built on intimidation and information control. He'd schedule important votes when he knew dissenting board members couldn't attend. He'd bury opposition in mountains of bureaucratic paperwork. When neighbors submitted complaints about his own property, those documents had a magical way of disappearing from the files. But most importantly, I learned that Todd had gotten sloppy. Power had made him arrogant, and arrogance had made him careless. He'd started making mistakes, big ones, and I was taking notes on every single one. During my second year on the board, something started nagging at me about our finances. Todd loved to brag about what a fantastic job he was doing managing the HOA's money. "Don't worry about the budget," he'd say with that same smug smile. "I've got everything under control." But our HOA fees were astronomical, nearly double what similar neighborhoods were paying. Meanwhile, our community was falling apart. The pool had been under maintenance for 3 months straight. The landscaping looked like a post-apocalyptic wasteland. Common areas that should have been pristine were crumbling into disrepair. Where was all our money going? I started asking questions. Polite questions at first, just a concerned board member trying to understand our financial position. Todd would wave me off with vague assurances and promises to get me those numbers next week. Next week became next month, which became I'm too busy right now. That's when I filed a formal request for the financial records. Under HOA law, board members have a right to review all financial documents. Todd couldn't legally refuse, but he could certainly drag his feet, and drag them he did. While I waited, I started talking to neighbors. Casual conversations at first. Just friendly chit-chat over backyard fences and at the mailbox. But a pattern emerged that made my skin crawl. Neighbor after neighbor had stories about Todd's suspicious behavior. Mrs. Peterson swore she'd seen Todd as contractor buddy installing what looked like a brand new patio at Todd S.'s house. Right around the same time, the HOA approved a massive infrastructure improvement expense. Mr. Williams had noticed Todd's kids swimming in the community pool during its supposed closure, splashing around while everyone else was banned for safety reasons. The more I dug, the clearer the picture became. Todd wasn't just a power-hungry dictator, he was a thief. When Todd finally handed over the financial documents 6 weeks late, and only after I threatened to involve a lawyer, they were a complete disaster. Pages were missing, invoices were mislabeled, some expenses were so ridiculous they read like a comedy sketch. A $15,000 landscaping fee paid to Green Dreams LLC, a company that did UNT exist in any business registry I could find. Thousands spent on administrative costs with absolutely no explanation or supporting documentation. Equipment purchases that never appeared in our community. Maintenance contracts with prices that were triple the market rate. I spent weeks cross-referencing every transaction with bank statements, public records, and vendor databases. What I found was a systematic embezzlement scheme that would make Bernie Madoff jealous. Todd had been funneling HOA money to shell companies he controlled. He'd inflated contractor costs and pocketed the difference. He'd even charged the HOA for consulting fees that went straight into his personal account. The numbers were staggering. Over $50,000 in confirmed theft, with potentially tens of thousands more in suspicious transactions. Todd had been treating our community fund like his personal piggy bank for years. I documented everything. Spreadsheets, photos, bank records, notarized witness statements from neighbors who'd seen Todd's schemes in action. I built a case so airtight that Perry Mason would have been proud. Annual HOA meetings were usually pathetic affairs. Todd, a couple of his cronies, and maybe 5 neighbors who showed up out of obligation. Perfect for Todd. Easy to control, easy to manipulate. This year was going to be different. I spent 3 weeks knocking on every door in our neighborhood. I didn't reveal everything I'd discovered, just enough to get people curious and angry. Did you know our HOA fees are twice the neighborhood average? Have you wondered where all that pool maintenance money went? Want to see what Todd's really been up to? The night of the meeting, our community room was packed, standing room only, with neighbors spilling out into the hallway. Todd walked in, expecting his usual sleepy audience, and instead found an angry mob waiting for answers. He tried to start with his typical routine, droning on about his sacrifices for the community and how challenging leadership could be. That's when I made my move. "Todd," I said, standing up from the back of the room, "before you continue, could you explain some discrepancies I found in our budget?" The color drained from his face. He tried to laugh it off, saying, "I don't think this is the time or place for detailed financial discussions." "Actually, Todd," I replied, walking toward the front of the room with a box of documents, "this is the perfect time and place." I started handing out copies of my report, 50 pages of documented theft, fraud, and embezzlement. You could hear a pin drop as people flipped through the evidence. Then the whispers started, then the gasps, then the shouting. Todd tried desperately to regain control, but it was too late. The crowd had seen the truth, and they were furious. Years of accumulated resentment over his tyrannical rule exploded all at once. People were demanding answers, shouting accusations, waving the financial documents in the air like evidence at a trial. I called for a vote of no confidence. It wasn't even close. Todd was removed as president by an overwhelming margin. His cronies on the board resigned rather than face the same scrutiny. In one evening, Todd's little kingdom crumbled to dust. But removing Todd from power was just the beginning. With full access to the HOA's records, we hired an independent forensic accountant to conduct a complete audit. The results were even worse than I'd suspected. Todd had stolen over $50,000 in confirmed funds, with evidence of fraud going back 5 years. We reported everything to the police and filed a civil lawsuit to recover the stolen money. The criminal investigation revealed that Todd's contractor buddy was in on the scheme. They'd been splitting inflated invoices and creating fake companies to launder HOA funds. Both men were arrested on multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. Todd's world collapsed spectacularly. The legal fees alone forced him to sell his house. The same house with all those unpermitted structures and code violations that he'd somehow never been fined for. The irony was delicious. The man who deterrorized neighbors with petty fines was now facing hundreds of thousands in legal costs and restitution payments. His reputation in the community was completely destroyed. Word spread to neighboring areas about his crimes. When he tried to join another HOA board in the next town over, someone Googled his name during the meeting and read his charges out loud. He was laughed out of the room. The contractor who'd helped him steal from us was banned from doing business in the entire county. Their company went bankrupt within 6 months when other clients realized they'd likely been scammed too. With Todd gone, we completely restructured the HOA to prevent another dictator from taking power. We implemented term limits, required multiple board members to approve any expense over $500, and created an online portal where every homeowner could access budgets, meeting minutes, and financial records in real time. Transparency became our watchword. The changes were immediate and dramatic. HOA fees dropped by 40% once we eliminated Todd's phantom expenses and inflated contracts. The pool reopened with proper maintenance. Our landscaping was restored to its former glory. The community actually started feeling like a community again, instead of a police state. Sometimes justice takes time, but when it arrives, it's absolutely beautiful. Todd learned the hardest way possible that nobody, no matter how much power they think they have, is above accountability. What's the most satisfying revenge story you've ever witnessed? Drop it in the comments below. I read every single one. If this story made you believe in karma again, smash that like button and hit subscribe for more epic tales of justice served ice cold. Trust me, we're just getting started around here.